You ever find yourself getting cynical? We live in this world where it seems like everybody's kind of got an angle they're trying to push or trying to sell us something. If you've hung out in the church, it's super easy to get cynical. I've been hanging out in the church for 45 years as a pastor's kid, and I just have to constantly fight this thing in me that wants to think negatively of people and the stuff they do. And I'm like, what is wrong with these people? King Solomon, he starts off his book of Ecclesiastes with what sounds like major cynicism. He says, hey, I'm the teacher here, the king of Israel, and life is meaningless. It's meaningless, 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 meaningless. And what's fascinating about King Solomon is, the dude had it made. God came to him and said, hey, I loved your father, King David, so much, I'm going to give you whatever you want. And so you get one wish. It's the classic genie in a bottle story. And for the record, if a genie does ever come to you and say you get one wish, the right answer is my one wish is for unlimited wishes. Okay, just so you know that. Well, King Solomon, he asks for wisdom. And wisdom is just the ability to rightly apply knowledge. He said, I got to rule these people. I need wisdom. And God's so impressed with this. He says, hey, you're not only going to get wisdom, your wisdom's going to lead to wealth and power. So King Solomon, he has it made. And I think it's an interesting thing that he kind of leads with what I would call clickbait. Okay, talk about cynical. I'm cynical of everything now, headlines in the news. I think he leads with clickbait when he's saying meaningless, meaningless, because he goes on to write this book that it starts like it's going to be a book of cynicism or despair, but it's actually a book of perspective. And perspective, I think, is really the ability to find meaning in necessary suffering, right? So there's some suffering in life that's just unnecessary. We deal with it because we just don't know how life works and we don't know God's wisdom, and so we create this unnecessary suffering in our life. But there's necessary suffering. Paul says, through much suffering we enter the kingdom of God, which I don't like that that's in there. I wish it wasn't in there. But for whatever reason, God has chosen to use suffering to create in us strength, right? So I think wisdom, or perspective, is really the ability to find meaning in some of the suffering that happens in life that you just can't get around. So King Solomon, he says, look, there's some realities of life you've got to deal with. And that's another thing I love about the book of Ecclesiastes is he doesn't sugarcoat anything. It's all right there. He says, look, I'm not asking you to be overly optimistic. And look, make no doubt, there are some people that I call it willful blindness. They would rather be willfully blind. Like they choose to not see something that could be seen because it's uncomfortable to look at. That's not going to get you anywhere good. You've got to look at uncomfortable things. And King Solomon, he points out a lot of uncomfortable things in the book of Ecclesiastes. And I would encourage you, if this is the year that you want to make some changes, one of the things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to look at some uncomfortable things. That's part of the reason I'm going through Ecclesiastes. I'm going to be doing it every day in January. You can log on right here and watch. I'm going to do a short little 5-minute devotional on the book of Ecclesiastes. We're going to go through verse by verse. But one of the things he says is you can't be ignoring realities. You've got to face some realities. And when you face those realities, you're able to conquer things. But if you refuse to look at what you'd rather not look at, you're never going to get there. And that's kind of rosy optimism. Like there's choosing to look on the bright sides, but there's also choosing to ignore things you need to look at. And you need a balance of both of those. So I think that is the key in Ecclesiastes. And that's where I love it. It's like a mirror. It gives you a chance to look at life, an unfiltered mirror, an unfiltered lens through that. But in the end of it, like I said, it's clickbait where he says meaningless, meaningless. At the end of the book, or throughout the book, you're going to see that there's a tremendous amount of wisdom and hope and perspective for you to be had. And it really applies to every day, because if we're honest, we've got it really good today. Yes, there are some bad things happening in the world, but we, compared to the life of King Solomon, he lived in the lap of luxury. We really live in the lap of luxury in many ways. You've got indoor plumbing, and you don't have to worry about where your next meal is probably going to come from. You get to decide, am I going to go pick it up at the grocery store or go to McDonald's? Well, we have options nobody had except King Solomon in the past. And I think sometimes it gets lost. Our perspective gets lost because of the moment in time in which we live. So we're going to check out Ecclesiastes. I want to encourage you, to start the year, really kind of maybe take a moment and get some perspective on your life. You may be feeling discouraged, depressed, feeling cynical. Take a moment and go, okay, this is really pretty good where I'm at. Take stock of the good things in your life. And then if there's some things you say, I'm going to need to address this year, write it down. Don't ignore it. Face the reality of where your situation is, what you're going to have to face. And it may not be pretty, but until it's looked at honestly, you can't face it and conquer it. That's my encouragement for you every day right here. We're going to be looking through Ecclesiastes. Come and join me.